Yo, what's up? My name's RetroPat, and spooky season is upon us. And today I have 10 different video game recommendations that you guys should play around Halloween. Now, a cool thing about this list is that all of these games are, firstly, games that I have myself played. So there's not going to be things, unfortunately, like Silent Hill, Resident Evil, or even Dino Crisis on this list, as I have not gotten around to those in my backlog. But that also means these all have the nice big RetroPat seal of approval. I would never personally recommend a game that I haven't played extensively enough to actually be able to suggest it. Your guys' time is important, and I don't want to waste that with a bad video game. However, if it isn't obvious enough, this list is going to be subjective. Now, another cool part about this list is that it's going to be 10 wildly different games. All of these games are going to have very, very different styles of play and fit into very different genres. But that's enough blabbering. Let's go ahead and jump into the list. Number 10, The Walking Dead Telltale series. The Telltale series Walking Dead games are actually a pretty long-running franchise actually at this point, with the first game releasing in 2012 and the most recent one in 2019. I'm going to be focusing on Season 1 since that's where you should begin. You're centered around a character named Lee, and you really don't know much about him besides the game starting off in the back of a cop car. The Walking Dead Telltale series, much like all the other Telltale series games, is all about your decisions and dialogue choices. There's not a whole lot of flying, crazy action combat or crazy combat mechanics, but this game doesn't need that. It's a storytelling game first and foremost, with your decisions taking real impact on how the game plays out. It's a really beautifully told story. One of the better Telltale games I think is widely agreed upon. And the game just does a fantastic job at introducing really human characters, ones you may not like at first, maybe you warm up to them, ones you may never end up liking, and also characters you may like at first but then find out they're kind of a coward in the zombie apocalypse where it really matters. The Walking Dead Telltale series games I feel like will always be a replayable classic for many people with lots of different paths, as well as being voted one of the best games of the decade by certain games news outlets. It's hard to go wrong. It's pretty cheap to get your hands on a copy of the first season of the game, anywhere from like $5 to $10 depending on whether you're playing on 360, PS3, PS4, or Xbox One. And you can even get the complete collections and such for around $20, $30, maybe $40 if you get all 4 to 5 of the different games that exist in this franchise. So you can start off by playing the first season, figure out whether you enjoy it or not, and then kind of go from there, whether you want to take the series to its end or just kind of take a break, maybe play a game each year during Halloween. It's really up to you. If you like choice and those choices mattering on how games end up, you've got to play this game. Next up is a game that I've already talked about for a little bit on this channel, but I didn't really give it the attention it deserved. Number 9 on my list is going to be Dante's Inferno. Dante's Inferno is a God of War style combat action adventure game. You play as Dante during the Crusades. You're sort of a paladin, and he kind of just takes his wrath out on whoever gets in his way. He ends up making some mistakes along that way, of course, and ends up in Dante's Inferno, going through the 9 layers of hell. This game took direct inspiration from the epic poem, also titled the same name, Dante's Inferno, and you see a lot of that history and lore represented in the game itself. If you're someone who enjoys crazy, over-the-top, dark imagery, and also incredibly beautiful and amazing combat mechanics, in my opinion, Dante's Inferno is an absolute must. If you care about deeper lore and deeper morality and understanding and deciphering those issues, also, I really recommend, one of my favorite parts about playing through this entire game was Googling every character that came up. There usually is a real-life counterpart, and you can usually learn a lot more about history. And let's just say my history education could use a little bit of a boost, and this game provided it. It's pretty rare you see a game start the entire game with a battle against the devil to take his scythe as a weapon for the rest of the game, and it only goes uphill from there. Next up, number 8 on our list is the classic that I'm sure you've all heard of, but it's a great game to go back to and just have some shoot 'em up fun with some friends. Left 4 Dead 2 is a game that released in 2009, has 10 out of 10 reviews on Steam, and is pretty much considered a masterpiece by anybody in the zombie genre. It's got great, lovable characters with tons of personality that'll never be forgotten, as well as just over-the-top zombie combat fun with pretty good balancing for the time, and just lots of chaotic, hectic shooting. This is a fantastic game with friends. Grab 3 other friends, play some 4-player multiplayer, and bash through the storyline together. You got different types of zombies that'll take down your friends, while you've got to run back and help them out. maybe I'm just a wussy, but Left 4 Dead 2 was also always a super scary game to me. I don't know why. I feel like it wasn't even meant to be that scary. It was much more of a fun combat action game, but man, something about the witches' cries and whining and the dark scenery, and you never really know what's about to pop around the corner. I think the action actually ended up making this game so much scarier, which a lot of horror games can excel at without any sort of action, and that'll lead us into the next two listings in our list. Number 7 on my list is one of my favorite games of all time, probably in my top 25, which doesn't seem very high, but I'd say it's pretty high. I'm talking about Limbo, a very quiet, somber, dark game where you simply wake up as a boy in the forest, tasked without a goal other than to just survive and get through it. You do end up finding out that after running to the right, the only direction you can go, you're looking after your lost sister. She's been lost in these woods and you need to find her and save her. You'll find lots of traps and different mechanisms and weird people and creatures and things attacking you in this dark, very grayscaled world. One of the most reoccurring characters you'll see is a giant spider that seemingly just won't leave you alone, and when you get skewered by him, it's pretty brutal. Limbo is a really unique game. It's mostly a puzzle-solving platformer question mark. You're mostly just running back and forth. You can only go left and right, and 90% of the time you're running right. But it still manages to be a totally whimsical, unique, and beautiful video game experience. Anyone who's ever told you to play Limbo is totally in the right, and it's just something super unique you can't experience with any other game. I can't recommend Limbo out enough on this list. Make sure to try it out. Number 6 on our list is another atmospheric, classic adventure game, Amnesia: The Dark Descent. If you were around YouTube anywhere around the time this game came out, I'm sure you've heard of this. This game was all over the place, and it honestly got a lot of gamers who weren't into horror games into horror games. Amnesia was so good at providing a really scary, terrifying atmosphere, a look into the unknown, while also taking away combat, which wasn't common at the time at all. Amnesia, in your only defense in this game, is to simply run away. That is something that becomes truly terrifying. Lacking the ability to fight back can really strip away your reasoning. Amnesia: The Dark Descent is a classic for a reason. You should definitely check it out. It's pretty cheap to get nowadays and a ton of fun. This is definitely one of those games that's better to set the mood around you to fully immerse yourself and experience. If you're brave enough, turn the lights off, make sure you're all alone, and plug your headphones in and just totally sink yourself into the world that is Amnesia. Next up, number 5 on our list is a wildly underrated PlayStation 2 game known as Okage: The Shadow King. This game centers around a little boy and his family, and it's essentially a JRPG with tons of dialogue and just lots of comedy and over-the-top ridiculousness along the way. Now, I have zero nostalgia with this game, and I think going back and playing certain PS2 games with zero nostalgia can be a little worrisome, but I promise you, it wasn't at all for me, and I hope it's not at all for you. This game was genuinely good. I had some actual laugh-out-loud moments at this, which is pretty hard to do in a video game, in my opinion. There's a narrator that talks over the boy at certain moments, which makes things a little ominous, but also a little silly. I will warn you, there is so much dialogue in this game. I think the opening scene is like a couple minutes, and then you just have more and more dialogue. You don't see combat in this game until probably 30 minutes to maybe an hour in, but you also meet a lot of really cool characters and lots of really cool atmosphere and environment, a lot of bright colors, and it's a very fun time for a quote-unquote Halloween or spooky themed game. One of my favorite parts of the early part of the game is that the Shadow King that gets attached to the young boy is trying to convince all the neighborhood kids that he's scary and evil, but they just aren't buying it. They essentially just laugh at him and want to hang out and play with him even more. The subversion of expectation of this game is just super solid, and it's a really fun, playful experience. I also understand when you hear the words PlayStation 2 JRPG, your wallet may let out a little poof of dust in desperation, but thankfully, Okage Shadow King is actually, for whatever reason, one of the cheaper JRPGs on the PS2 at around $20 still for complete in box. Now, I'm really glad that game was pretty cheap because number 4 on our list is quite the opposite. Number 4 is going to be Clock Tower 1 and 2 on PlayStation 1. Clock Tower 1 and 2 are most similar on this list to something like The Walking Dead. There's a lot of kind of choices and dialogue and decision, but it's more so adventure and exploration than that. There's less dialogue options and more, should I walk into this room or that room and worry about getting killed? Most of the gameplay consists of this old PC-styled point-and-click adventure game. Clock Tower may not be for everybody since it's a pretty unique style of game, but at the same time, I kind of recommend that everybody try out Clock Tower at one point or another. The villain in this game is a madman wielding a giant pair of scissors, and this game packs the classic PlayStation 1 horror sound design and visuals. I think the PS1 probably has some of the best horror games in my opinion. That lack of clarity and sort of pixelated mesh goodness really plays into the unknown and really gets you nice and scared. It leaves your mind and your imagination filling in the blanks, which can often be worse than what a high pixel, high quality game could show you. But as much as I think everybody should try Clock Tower 1 and 2 at some point, or at least a similar game, the price tags make me kind of go back on that. Maybe try it with emulation first. I love Clock Tower 1 and 2, and even I wouldn't say they're worth these price tags, but that's going to be a personal preference. Maybe you're a die-hard Clock Tower fan. Let me know in the comments. Number 3 on our list is thankfully a pretty budget-friendly game, usually costing you around $5 to $15 depending on the sales. I'm talking about a game that I am atrocious at, but I still love to play every once in a while for a couple hours, The Binding of Isaac. Now, I do recommend you getting The Binding of Isaac Rebirth. The Binding of Isaac is just a fantastic, it's one of the first, I feel like, games that really revolutionized and popularized dungeon crawlers, specifically roguelikes. The Binding of Isaac really popped off the roguelike genre, especially during the era it released, and it revolutionized things. It brought people into the genre that people didn't like it before. I know it was one of my first roguelikes. One of the first games that, hey, once you lost, you had to start over from entirely scratch, start a whole new randomized dungeon run. It's really just a game about Isaac being trapped by his mother, and you sort of go through this basement dungeon, getting power-ups and mechanics, and going through a very unique adventure every time. The Binding of Isaac is an absolute classic, and I think if you do enjoy roguelikes, you've got to try this one. There's a reason why it popularized the genre. I think a lot of games have built upon The Binding of Isaac's mechanics and really, kind of gone a long way with the roguelike genre, but I do think Binding of Isaac is still worth playing, at least for 20 to 30 hours or so, and get your bearings on it. Rebirth can be played for much, much longer, obviously being 50 to hundreds of hours. Rebirth, from my understanding, is essentially just a better copy of the game. It's kind of a remake, as well as a lot more content and rebalancing was done to the game. This game has a hugely dedicated fan base, though, so I'm sure if I missed anything with that overview, they'll correct me in the comments. I've only ever been able to beat this game once, and then after you beat it once, I'm pretty sure you unlock more difficult and more stages in general, and I've never been able to beat those. I'm just not very good at this game. This game is very truly difficult. So if you're looking for a difficult roguelike, try out Binding of Isaac. Next up, number 2 on my list, winding down, number 2 is going to be the absolute classic, Dead Space. Now, Dead Space did recently get a remake, which I have not played, but I have played the entirety of the original Dead Space. A lot of people seem to really like the remake, so I do want to recommend that. However, at the moment, the price difference is pretty extreme, with the remake being around 40 to 60 bucks and the original Dead Space being around $5. So it's really up to you if you want that graphical difference and if you care about that. But if you want to wait, 10 years or probably even 3 to 5 years, I'm sure the remake will go down in price over time. But right now, as it's still semi-new at the making of this video, it's a pretty still big price difference. Now, keep in mind, Dead Space is a fantastic game to immerse yourself into and really put yourself into the mind of Isaac, the main character. Dead Space is all about unknown in space. A lot of these horror games, a lot of what makes good horror games is the unknown. You're just a miner. You're just a worker who's trying to come over to this spaceship and figure out what the heck is going on because they're not responding to your ship. You're just a humble engineer there to kind of fix things up and help them out when aliens attack and you've got to defend yourself. Dead Space 1 is constantly praised for its incredibly unique and creative, original, beautiful storyline that has a lot of twists and turns that were pretty big for the time. I shouldn't even say for the time. I don't think that's respectful enough to Dead Space. I think even to this day, having played it in completion for myself within the past year or so for the first time, this game definitely held up. This is definitely a game that you should, I recommend turning off the lights, cranking up the sound, and immersing yourself into. The jump scares are going to be that much more powerful. Or if you're scared of that, maybe play it with the lights on with some friends in the room. You'll meet a lot of crazy characters along the way as you try to save this ship and see what other humans exist and who else is alive, while you slowly lose your mind fighting off these aliens and just trying to make a sense of all this mess. Now on to easily the scariest game I've ever played. Yes, it's weeb shit. Well, kind of. This is Akamanto, a game centered around a girl going into her school grounds at night as sort of a hazing period from her friends, it seems, and she's not exactly alone, and you come to find that. What makes Akamanto so special to me, and it's pretty much just a Slenderman clone, one of those original games where it's something kind of just creeping around and trying to attack you while you collect certain things. What makes Akamanto so special is the graphics and the stylization. It's in this PS1 stylized, meshy, mushy graphics that just make things that much more terrifying. You slowly piece together this story and grab certain items here and there, just constantly on the edge of your seat, to where even something like an insect crawling by you is going to make you jump out of your seat. I streamed this game a Halloween or two ago, and that was one of my biggest regrets ever. I think after 40 minutes, I ended up Alt F4ing, and I had to quit and just stop there. I couldn't do it anymore. The sound design, eerie noise, and creepy jump scares in this game will just constantly leave you afraid, terrified, and wondering when that giant creepy monster with the mask will pop out to snatch you up. Akamanto is by far the scariest game I've ever played, and anyone that I've ever recommended to play it usually agrees. The missing girl posters set all around this school ground as you are a little girl being chased by this monster just really sinks it home. Akamanto is just the best Slenderman type game, hilarious sentence I know, that I've ever seen or seen played. So make sure to check it out. It's also a steal on Steam, I think only being around $3 to $5. But that's it. That's my list. That's my top 10 games I recommend you guys go check out or give a try around the Halloween season. Thank you so much for watching. I super appreciate it. Hopefully there was at least one game that sounded interesting to you guys to check out. And if there was, make sure to leave a like on the video to let me know. Dislike if not, and subscribe for daily videos until I reach 1,000 subscribers. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. I'll see you guys later. Peace, Reno.